The Zay Initiative, an ode to the past, a nod to the future, a collection of Arab dress and adornment, celebrating human narrative.
Friends of the Zay, creative advisors and guests, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Dialogue on the Art of Arab Fashion, Syrian Textile, Aida and Tulip's Syrian Folk Art Doll Collection. And of course, happy International Women's Day to all of our community. We're delighted that you're able to share this time on a very, very busy day, particularly in Dubai when live events are 100% here. Please do introduce yourselves on the chat and let us know where you're from. And as ever, following the event, we will go behind the scenes. And tonight, we're delighted that there's going to be an extra special guest on behind the scenes as well. If you're not yet a friend of the Zay, please, and would like to join, my apologies, please do message Reem Ashraf on chat or email marketing@thezay.org and she will assist you. As ever, directly following this webinar, we'll allow some time for Q&A. So please add your Q&A through the Q&A function on Zoom. I will do my very best to also pick them up from chat, but I'm not always the best at doing that. Also, don't forget that there's lots of different features on Zoom. And if you want to view Aida more, please do pin her to the screen and you can change how it all looks. If you don't know how to do that, ask Reem, Ashraf, myself, or indeed Kat. Anyway, as you all know, all our sessions are absolutely recorded and sent to registered participants within 24 hours of the event for viewing within 2 weeks. All our friends of the Zay get them forever, so do become one of those. Anyway, that's quite enough from me tonight. Allow me to introduce you to Dr. Reem el Mutwalli, who will introduce you to our speaker. Good evening, Dr. Reem, or good afternoon, Dr. Reem, I should say.
Hello, Emma, how are you? Hello, team.
Good.
Welcome to our world, a world in which we routinely converse with voices from the past and hope to address readers from the future. As we all explore the story of dress and how to make sense of this combination of old and new. We happen to meet today on an auspicious day, International Women's Day. The theme for International Women's Day for 2022 is Break the Bias, referring to gender equality. At the Zay Initiative, we fully believe and support this ideal. But as a cultural organization, we've decided to apply this theme to cultural equality too. Let's work towards a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. I believe together we can forge women's equality. Collectively, we can all break the bias. Now, for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time, I always like to start by explaining that our name emanates from the Arabic term Zay. Zay literally means the culture, the costume and general attire of a certain country or era. And why Arabic? Because the Zay Initiative is concerned with the legacy of the Arab world. The Zay Initiative is founded to help promote an understanding of evolution of regional culture across the Arab world through dress, to build public awareness and appreciation for this unique heritage, and to create a platform for like-minded individuals and institutions nationally, regionally, and globally. Simply put, and as you always hear me say, the Zay Initiative collects the tangible to narrate the intangible. We collect artifacts to help record the stories of those who used or wore them. We are a UK registered nonprofit that especially focuses on empowering the women regionally and globally by bringing their untold stories to life. We at the initiative own over 1,800 pieces of dress and adornment from across the Arab world and the surroundings. On our website, you will see over 200 key examples of these dresses by simply navigating the collection. We are working towards all the articles being added to the collection by publishing few of them at a time. Some of you might wonder, what do we mean when we mention the Arab world? An Arab is a cultural trait rather than a racial one. Not all Arabs are Muslims, nor all Muslims are Arabs. The Arab world is full of rich and diverse communities, ethnicities, religions, groups, and cultures, including Muslims, Christians, Jews, Yazidis, Kurds, Armenians, Amazigh, Berber, and many other minorities. Differences exist not only among countries, but within countries as well. There are 200 million Arabs worldwide, and generally, anyone who adopts the Arabic language is typically called an Arab. Now, befitting the topic of the day, as we celebrate women's achievements everywhere and raise awareness against bias, our guest is a Syrian American designer, collector, and an author who will be taking us through her personal journey that started with a deep sense of duty and responsibility towards empowering displaced women and an urge to renovate an old Damascene house, and you will see how in a minute, only to be led into a more personal quest for documenting, preserving symbols from her home country through the medium of dolls. Aida, welcome to our session today.
Well, thank you for that lovely, lovely introduction. And happy International Women's Day to you too, and everyone out there.
We are very excited about today's session and the topics and the stories that you will be sharing with us. And I know it's going to raise so many questions by the end of this session, based on what we've gone through our rehearsal. But let's start by asking you to give us a brief background on yourself, please.
Oh, okay. Well, so I was taken to Syria at 9 months old. My mother stayed there for 21 years, and then I came back to the United States as a young bride, and I always wanted to do art. I did study child development, which is something to do with the dolls. And I really was my father collected Persian rugs before furniture, before anything in the house. So did my grandfather. And I really became very, very comfortable with layered patterns and of course, brocade. And it sort of segued into Arabic calligraphy, and then it went into French brocade jackets, and I started designing outerwear.
So how long have you been in the US?
Oh my God, 1981, so 40 years now.
Wow, okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And how did you come across all this collection? Do you go back and forth to Syria?
Yeah. So I had two influences in my life. I had my mother who collected, brass, mosaics, etc. And then I had my husband's mother, who's Danish, a true Orientalist. And she was really keen on the costumes. And at the time she was living in Kuwait, and she had this thriving business of taking costumes to Kuwait. And I had already started collecting at 17 years old, and it just took off from there. Then I just started collecting my own every time I went to Damascus. Of course, I had a lot of good help from super knowledgeable merchants that collected it for the museum in London, and they collected it for other anthropologists, etc.
So let's begin with Syria. And you explained to me, and I would like you to carry this explanation to our audience, that Syria, of course, is rich with history, but we're talking about dress and the tradition of dress within dress culture within Syria. And you said to me that there are 14 different regional styles. Maybe you can touch upon that?
Yeah, it's not only styles within each province of Syria, and there are 14, there are several different clothing styles. And depending on whether it's, the industry is cotton or silk, that really influenced the textile production, weaving, etc. And remember, we're talking about a very long history in Syria, which was only divided in the 40s. So while we had silk growing in the areas of today's Lebanon, the manufacturing hubs were in Damascus, Aleppo, Hama, etc. So things were, really bubbly and busy, and the clothing reflected. Once you put borders in, which the West, of course, sliced everybody up, then people start to get confused. Who did what? But if you look at it as a whole region, Bilad al-Sham or the Levant, and work from there, you'll have a better time.
Correct. And of course, we cannot cover all these different styles based on these regions, as you said, but today we're going to speak about just 2 of them because they pertain to the subject matter that we're talking about and will lead us into your doll creation. But I want to reserve the right that we bring you back to speak to us about the other regional styles.
Yes, of course. I tried to put some up behind me just to idea. And of course, I cover it in some of my very short YouTube movies on my channel, Syrian Traditional Textile Arts, I think. At any rate.
You want to point out to the ones behind you? Yes, and start telling us about them.
They always say, don't start, from way back. But unfortunately, we have to. You know that, I know that. So I wanted to bring in Sarakid first. And I want to say just a couple things about textiles in Syria. Don't over-focus on embroidery. Our strength is weaving.
Is what?
Weaving.
Weaving.
Textile actually manufacturing. As a matter of fact, it takes about 2 kilos of cotton to produce 1 to 2 meters of textile. So you can imagine there were over 5,000 different weaving homes or businesses, because they were family owned, in some of the cities like Hama or in Aleppo or in Damascus. So Sarakid for me was interesting. First of all, this jacket weighs a good 2.5 kilos because it's heavily embroidered, which is not the norm in Syria. And if you look at the mythology in it, it goes back, things evolve. So after Paulo Matea in Tel Mardikh, which is, Tel in Arabic means a hill, turns out there was this city, and the city goes back to the Bronze Age. The same type of motifs continue today. Now, they've taken sort of a Christian turn, they took an Islamic turn, but the art is still consistent. It just gets new labels. And that's what I found fascinating about this area.
And when you say it's the region, just so that for people who don't understand, you are referring to as a region in Syria, correct?
Yeah, yes. So Sarakib should be up. So if it's north of Hama, so it falls in between 2 different provinces kind of thing. Okay. It is on the northeast side of Syria. So that would be closer to Turkey, closer to the Mediterranean.
We lost your video, Aida.
Okay.
I think we'll wait for a few seconds. Maybe she will reconnect.
We've just temporarily lost Aida. The team are just going to go, and she might just have an internet connection probably. Just give us a minute or so. But Dr. Reem, what a fascinating discussion, and what beautiful bits of clothing.
Yes, it's gorgeous, and I'm very I think we are very lucky. I'm very pleased that we at the Zay Initiative have a sample of these two different examples that she's going to introduce to us. We have a few pieces from Saraqib, and we also have a few pieces from the tie-dyed version on the left side. And actually, the one on the left side came to us from Saudi Arabia. Of all people, a lady, an expatriate woman who lived in Saudi Arabia, sent it to us, donated it to us, and she didn't know where it came from. And once we received it, we spent a few months researching to find out where did this piece originate from. And we discovered that it was a Syrian piece. It shows you the relationship of from one area to the other, and how these articles of clothing were worn by many different women and carried from one place to the other, which is fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating. It was also fascinating what she was saying about that it's weaving, which is so important in Syria.
Definitely.
I'd love to understand a little bit more about that.
Especially the brocade of Syria. Of course, the most valuable woven materials, Syrian materials, were distributed all around the Arab world and the West as well, and internationally from the Middle Ages till today. And many of the textiles in the European culture, the names of textiles come from areas from Syria, like Damascene, it's from the Dimashqi or Damascus, and so on and so forth. Aida, thank you for coming back.
A little malfunction. Obviously, my sleep dial on my Zoom is not complying with me today. Yes, I'm so sorry about that.
Let's go into the second type, the second style, just for the sake of time, which is
the second region, Hama. So Hama, I really wanted to talk about because it is a spun silk. And then this method is called Pelangi, but it's basically they put a little seed inside of every little section that they create this geometric design. And the beautiful thing about this dress is that it's really takes a lot of training to do. It, of course, does not exist anymore. And like I say, it really tells you the story about how one dress between global warming, catastrophes, political uprising, can just disappear off the face of the earth.
Yeah, just to add to this, you were explaining, and just to clarify, the way the designs are created on this piece of dress is by putting a small seed and then tying it one at a time, creating this pattern, and then dyeing the fabric. So when the fabric is dyed afterwards and when it dries, the area is removed, and the areas where the dye does not go creates this pattern. And what is interesting, Aida, is that this pattern or this technique, it goes all the way to Japan. They've got it in Japan, they've got it in China, they've got it in all different areas of the world.
Yes. But in Syria, but in Syria, this is the only region that does this. Now, the problem is after 1980, they don't exist. So I'm very particular about reproducing this dress. We cannot reproduce this dress today. So I am having some women actually embroider the dots. It takes a lot of work. I want to show you what the dress really looks like. Now this one I've worn today.
The sample is an embroidered one.
Pardon? The embroidered ones are still in Raqqa. I have an initiative there to keep women floating financially, women who lost their husbands or their husbands are imprisoned. And, I found a way to actually keep 3 houses with mothers and daughters kind of financed. It's not a lot of money, but it's what I can do on my budget. And, I feel very good about it. This is the dress. As you can see, each one is different. They used to come all sealed. Only when you were a bride, they unseal it and then they cut in the neckline. which is leads to believe that it was a very organized cottage industry.
Mhm.
Everything in Hama, Homs, Aleppo, Damascus were a very, very prosperous, organized textile industry. Because if you go back in textile history in the region, the guilds had autonomy. Unlike the Catholic Church, which controlled a lot of the threads and the dye stuff and kept track of what's being made because it went only to special groups to embroider for the church, for the glory of the church. And that's how you sort of climbed up the hierarchy. And that was the only way open to women as well. But in the Middle East, in the Islamic world, starting with the Umayyads, they stopped that. They didn't have that. So, but they were very keen on collecting taxes to build things like the Umayyad Mosque, which took 7 years of the taxes of the Damascenes. So maybe the merchants weren't too happy about this, but it really made the industry extremely free and open and kind of democratic.
Wonderful. Which takes us to this. I know you are a woman of many interests and passions, and you have published a book. And before you got to the stage of making the dolls, I think we need to explain to everyone that you went back to Damascus and decided to renovate a house, a Damascene house.
Yes. Well,
So tell
it
me a
was
little bit about that.
okay. So, everything is connected, even though you're in America and you're a Syrian. So it was the Bush years.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, let's just take some money and invest it in Damascus. It looked very promising. It was becoming more modern. They had some foreign banks. So we looked and looked and looked, and it's a long story, but we finally found a modest house we could buy. And we said, we'll do itsy bitsy renovation, just this much. Of course, the house was owned by a group of sisters and his brother, and he had the house. He was the baby, and he made yogurt. So the house stunk of milk, which I hate, but it was right in the middle of Old Damascus on an Aramaic street and walking distance to the church and to the Umayyad Mosque. So it had to be purchased, and we did. And I learned everything about Ablaq stone, about doing everything. And it was really fun. I mean, like that, our
So how many months did you spend renovating this?
Oh, it took 2 years to find the right crooked engineer.
And you wrote a diary.
Sign off on the paper renovation.
You wrote a diary, which I read, of all the steps that you went through, and we have an image of that there. And once you restored it, what happened?
Once I restored it, I was the lucky one who actually got to live in it a little bit. My daughter was studying in Beirut, Jasmine. She got to live in it. We gave each daughter a room, so they came and visited. And then we had diplomats live in it. It was the days of VRBO before Airbnb. And so we had people from London, and we had the cultural attaché from Berlin, blah, blah, blah. And then when we decided finally to go down, my husband had never slept there except 10 days over 3 years. And then the revolution happened, and the rest is history. It's still there.
Wonderful. You're very lucky, and I hope one day we will get to visit it and see that house. Beautiful
It is
house.
beautiful. Yeah, you can see the Umayyad Mosque from the house, which is amazing.
And as we talk along, people will realize why we brought in the story of the house. But before we get into that and how it relates to these dolls, I thought maybe we can now introduce the idea of the dolls and how you came about to doing those.
Oh, okay. So the dolls are two sides. First of all, this is one, I do a lot of collaborations. I did one with Anat in Damascus, with the Palestinians in Yarmouk. In the 90s, I did this one with Tulip in New York. I have 2 new ones coming up with other a Syrian scholar actually. But the idea of the dolls was, the revolution comes along, we're in our 2017, so we are in our sixth year.
Mhm.
And everybody was sort of disillusioned and sad, and we decided, I had met Tulip over Pinterest. She had contacted me about designing some clothes for her clients, and then she called me and she said, should we do something? And I am consulting for free, of course, with an NGO that wants to make beading for Syrians to finance them. And I thought, I worked with beading in Damascus, and that I didn't feel that was the right avenue for us to, and the women were not there. And I went into this whole spiel with them on the phone about the dynasties and the colors and the blocking and the branding. And they, of course, kind of ran away because it was just too much information, just like today. But Tulip said, if I design the dolls, because I've been collecting dolls since I was 11 in Prague and from Russia, from everywhere. And if I design the dolls, she would find refugees or Syrian women in America to embroider something on them. Now, Syrian women all go to college in general. If they're not in college, we have a beading industry, which is this beautiful beading they do for Europe. And so it was really, we had to learn how to embroider. And I know how to sew and design, and I had all these fabrics in my archives because I designed the clothing. I've been doing it for 35 years. So when we went ahead and I said, I will design the dolls. And then you can get some women to do the panels, the little panels. And I based it really on the research of my book, because I had all this research. I spent 8 years reading everything. And, even though I was raised in Damascus and left at 20, I didn't know half of what I knew. So I thought, okay, well, what can we do that is neutral and everybody understands? So we went big. We didn't go regional little dresses. Oh, how nice and how sweet and how cute. I went Umayyad, Ayyubide, and I can start showing you. It's easier, more interesting if you look at them.
So you decided to go by periods of time, in time.
Right,
and
it's easier just to go really quickly through the periods, and then you just stop me and say, Aida, TMI. Okay, so because I had to make my house in Damascus, which was modest, apparently I had to also take over 5,000 photographs of all the existing houses, because I didn't have a qa'a, and a qa'a in Damascus, in an old courtyard house, is the main living room. It's where you show all the extravagance of the family, the wealth, or your taste, your level of taste. So on your left is the bookcase in Beit Nahsan, and on the right is the Umayyad lantern, either at the V&A or at the Met in New York. And I thought, and I was actually having those lamps made even in 2007 for my house, a glass blower in Damascus, because glass had existed forever. And actually pinched glass and milk glass was found in Damascus, in Jobar, in a Jewish cemetery. And of course, you know this book, and I know this book. It's called Bazaar to Piazza. It's tracing the art from the 13th century to the 16th century, from the Middle East, Syria in particular, to Italy.
Correct.
To Venice, actually. So I thought, perfect. This is going to be the branding for the Umayyads. Now, I can't see anything on my screen, so I'm holding them up.
Wonderful.
So we set out to do them, and Tulip, who has a huge cache of semi-precious stones, proceeded to add all the beautiful stones to it. I never thought of doing that because I'm a textilist, you never mix that much medium. And the nice thing about it is that the lantern is an iconic symbol of the Umayyad first Islamic dynasty, and it has nothing to do with the religion. It's really a visual art, because this is what Al-Walid al-Awwal, who built the mosque, spent all the money of the Damascenes on. It took him 10 years to make it, about. It became a symbol. It went on to be a symbol to the Mamluks later on, who came in, and they wanted to look, when you're Egyptian and you're occupying Syria in the 14th and 13th century, you want to be nice to the locals. So you adopt the same symbolism, the same visual art, in hopes that you blend in. And so they started gifting an homage to the first dynasty. So to be royal, they gifted all these lanterns all over the world as diplomatic gifts. We move on, and notice it's blue, because blue is the color of paradise reflected onto the earth, and earth reflected onto the sky. It's water, basically, in my opinion.
Yes.
Then we go into the whole reason I did the doll collection. So in my research, I live in Damascus. I live on Qasyun Mountain, which is hard stone in Aramaic. I didn't know that at the time. That's what the word means. This neighborhood where, invaders came and invaders left Damascus. Remember, Damascenes never left their country. Thousands of years, they never were forced out. They are very, very adapting people. They find ways, they cut deals, they pay it off. I'm talking, 10th century, 12th through the 18th. So I had a driver, and my driver, who was actually a translator during the Iraqi war, of all things, he said, I'm going to take you to this neighborhood. See, eventually we all cross each other's paths. And when he took me to this neighborhood, it's called Riknuddin, and of course, a lot of Kurdish Syrians live there as well. It's on the hill. Why is it on the hill? It's because as the city got more and more people in it, there's no room. So the newcomers were sort of had to move out of the walls. So they moved onto the mountain overlooking the city. And it turns out that some people say 16%, some people say 14%. I was reading new documentation yesterday. Just Google Ayyubide women and religious architecture, patrons of religious architecture in Damascus. You find that women financed some of these buildings because they always said Damascus is feminine. And there's, it's jasmine, it's roses. It has nothing to do with the color. It's the touch. It's absolute touch. It's fine. It's just fine. You weave in and out of the buildings and alleys. So what did we do? So you can see these on different places. So I illustrated, that's the first doll I did on the left. And then Tulip and team duplicated or enhanced, or, I would ship all the illustrations to them and they would send back finished embroidery. I did not like Game of Thrones, so I spent all my evenings illustrating faces. And then each girl, which is great for an artist like myself who hates duplication, every woman had an attitude, which was great. And Tulip was very skillful. She would, once you meet her, you'll see that she also has a very, very tongue-in-cheek attitude about things. And so, we were doubling down. It became a competition. So this is one I completely completed. This is my first one that I ever did. And then I will skip all the hullabaloo about how the women became these patrons of architecture and Sufi cupolas, etc., and school builders and hospices. And you can ask me later if you have, you have anything you want to know anything more. Then we go to the Mamluks. I had finally, by looking at the Qa'a artwork in Beit al-Aqad, which is, do you see that beautiful pedestal with the fruit? So this is sort of like an emblem of the Mamluk era. Now the Mamluk era really, as one of my very good scholarly Syrian architecture friends says, everything you today, the West, El Magazine, El Decor, all these foreign publications refer to as Ottoman was Mamluk. Mm-hmm. Basically, this Mamluk look was the last fashionable look for 200 and something years in Damascus and Aleppo, etc., all the cities, because afterwards, these princes that came from Egypt that were running Syria, Damascus and the big cities, remember Damascus and Aleppo were kingdoms, basically they fought together so much that they ended up basically losing the entire Mamluk hold on the Levant. And the Turks came in and they swept up, and the rest is history, because then we became under occupation for 400 to 500 years. And the first thing they did, of course, was strip the arts and strip the language and strip education. That's how you divide and conquer. But there are a few Mamluk houses and paintings and walls, etc., left in Syria. And this is some of it. So the one on the right is from Beit al-Aqad, which is a complete restored Mamluk house with the help of the Danish Cultural Center. It's become a Danish Cultural Center. It's in the students, architecture students and restoration of the Syrian University in Damascus. And I was there at the same time. And actually, they are a few streets away from me. And so it was really fun because, here he was, this guy, there's a beautiful book about it, Akkad, Beit al-Aqad, with a double Q, by the way, it's a Danish spelling. So he had the splendorous Mamluk house, and I had the humble, but very pretty 3-story house next to the Umayyad Mosque. So basically, I really always wanted all these sort of paintings that were in the living rooms of the women living room, because there was always 2 living rooms, one for men, one for women, so you could separate and have parties simultaneously. And I wanted to show you what we did with the emblems. So first there were flowers. This is Tulip's, can you see it?
Yeah.
These we could do in any color, so Tulip was very happy about that. I really tried to keep the branding consistent because the Ayyubites were in pink domed buildings, so all the dolls were pink. That one I was successful. The Umayyads, there was some people went out of the colors, but basically embroidery stayed all in blue. But the Mamluks was a free for all. So I wanted to show you.
They are so beautiful and so tactile.
I'm sorry, I have to go get them. So this is the pedestal with the Damascus fruit. And this motif was what I used for the Mamluk era. Now, if you go onto YouTube and you watch all these documentaries about Damascus rooms, you will really really see what I tried to do here. I really tried to transfer our splendor, our history, and this very intimate little details, because this is really the size of the paintings in Damascus on the walls and in the bookcases. They're very tiny. And then
Aida, can I ask a question? You have taken these symbols and embroidered them into these, like a plaque onto those dolls. Yeah. But have you followed any of the regional styles of clothing? You decided not to do that, right?
I decided not to do that for many reasons. One being that to do the different regions, you have to educate the Syrians in the cities, the big cities, about the regions. For example, I never knew that there was a Kurdish Syrian look, or a Euphrates Derizor look, you know, Atana or Up, you know, there's different ones. Let me show you. I mean, this is Horan. I mean, isn't this amazing? Look at this one.
Beautiful.
This one I'm also having reproduced. Oh, my mannequin's stubborn. But look at her slap. It's called the weapon because it's slung over her shoulder, her amulet.
Yes.
And of course,
we are wearing our handbags in this form in today's world. So they were doing
what?
You know, now the fashion to wear your handbag cross-bodied and just reminiscent that these women were doing this such a long time ago.
For the busy woman. Women were born busy. But yes, and then this is, of course, Qalamun, which is so beautiful. Look at the hand-woven cotton. Isn't that beautiful?
Gorgeous.
And then look at all the wheat around her coat. And I mean, we haven't even touched on indigo, the dyes, etc. It's just a really fun. Now you notice I only covered 3 dynasties.
Yeah.
So what do you do about the Abbasides, right? I have to say that I wasn't thrilled to do the Abbasides because, you know, they conquered Damascus, and then they of course trashed all the royal Umayyad graves and burned a lot of stuff. But you know what? You can't overlook the Abbasides. It's a grand dynasty, and of course, coming from Iraq. And so I thought, okay, we'll celebrate their bookmaking, their literature. So this is Kitab al-Haywan, which is sort of like, is it an encyclopedia of philosophy of animals, nature, and the cycles of life kind of thing?
Fables
And
life.
Pardon?
They are fables spoken in the voice of animals to teach wisdom and stories about life.
Yeah, life and actually, so I'll show you a couple. And these girls sit on a chair because they're so special. Oops, can you see them?
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Look at this one. So of course I designed these beautiful hoop skirts because, you know, they're so affluent. And then Tulip, of course, we discovered this beautiful thread floss that has metallic in it. And, you know, you show a metallic brocade floss to a Damascene and we immediately have to use it. She's in the matte phase, but this is the same study I did. And I just kept embroidering them. Everything I had to embroider first and time it and see, you know, is it really doable? Because if you look at Syrian embroidery, it's not like Palestinian embroidery or Ukrainian embroidery. It doesn't really follow a grid. And then you crisscross inside the grid and then you remove the grid at the end. It's more like lef, and lef means you bind it. And so it's kind of like, it's the difference between knitting and crochet. Of course I crochet because there's less rules. So is left embroidery. In the end, as long as it looks gorgeous, and you have filled the thread properly and you're not skimping on your stitches, it's gorgeous.
Is left satin stitch? Is that what you're trying to say, rather than cross stitch?
It could be a satin stitch. It's also a chain stitch. It's just as long as, you know, it's in and out with, I don't know, because, you know, I'm a clothing designer and I just don't deal with embroidery that way. And I do left, which is, you know, it's like looped. You just keep going.
Yes. And you started teaching women how to do this embroidery, as we see here.
Well, I took some to my friend in Napa, who I know from, as a child in Damascus, and she volunteered 3 Mamluks. Of course, she wanted Mamluk, God forbid. You know, she wanted the most opulent. Tulip had a lot of Syrian guests and a couple of refugees and family also pitch in, because it became sort of like a, in America, they call it like a quilting circle. But, you know, in America, you still have to, I mean, poor Tulip, she was driving back and forth, New Jersey, New York, with her crew, just keeping everybody in you know, on course. In the end, I think we did over 100 small panels between us all. But I want to show you the book. This is the first one I wanted to do. You know, how do you practice? So I took this one. Can you see it?
Yes, it's beautiful.
So this is the first one I ever made on a hoop, and I timed it, and I realized it took me, but I'm sort of quick. It took me 2 hours to do this. So I made a super simpler one, bought 20 hoops, met with Tulip and some women, and we said, you know, try it. But, you know, some people were kind of still traumatized from their journey to the United States. Some Syrians who lived here had too much on their plate to do. And it wasn't altogether a smooth beginning. Eventually, different people made them. I had a client who was visiting from New Jersey in Menlo Park, helping her elderly mother, and she came and she would take embroidery and go back to the East Coast, and she would make more Mamluk emblems and bring them back to me, kind of thing. It's, you know, it became, I would say, 10% Americans, 20% refugees, and the rest was Syrian women.
Wonderful. And this is Tulip, right?
This is Tulip. This is Tulip, our first 2 dolls. In the beginning, I wanted them to be modern, so they were, you know, they're wearing sleeveless dresses. This is the first Ayyubite neighborhood, Riknuddin I did. And this is the first, yeah, I did this one too. Mamluk. And of course, I gave myself my own crest too, you know.
How beautiful. And I think what is important, I think what your work illustrates, in my opinion, is the fact that you are sustaining this tradition, this history, these symbols through, you know, repeating the symbolism, and that, which is a lot of the young generation do not understand, and this makes it very clear, is the fact that when you are getting influenced by a culture or by the history that we come from, it doesn't mean that we have to produce replicas, going back and doing the same stitch and the same design and the same repetitive formats, whether it is in style or it's in embroidery or in technique. But we can choose something, one element, and start using it in our own way. And that's what I really was attracting me to what you are doing, because it doesn't necessarily have to be an exact replica of you know, something from Saraqib or something from Hama or something from Damascus, but it could be inspired.
But you could also choose symmetry or asymmetric, like the sarakit dress. I mean, you know, the power of symbolism, the queens, the deities, you know, the asymmetry. I mean, you know, everybody has an opinion why one is different than the other.
Yes.
And this is what you really want your sisters in your country to think about when they have time, that is. But I mean, you know, it's so much more fun. I mean, Fendi is beautiful, but my gosh, we have beautiful things too.
And this is another theme.
This is, okay, so now we leave Aida and Tulip, because that project was 2 years, it was done. And I have to be very careful to state that of course, I continue. I mean, I've been an artist forever, and I'm a textile artist, and you can't imagine how much fabric and trim I have. And so this is my group. I just thought, because I work with the women in the Raqqa on embroidery, and I thought, you know, let's do something happy and positive for them. And us, I mean me. So, I mean, and these are relatively new. I just made them, I think 2 months ago. But I just thought, you know,
Beautiful.
it's just their hope. They're all about hope. All the flowers are growing from the bottom. You know, it's the reeds, the beginning of writing. In Sumeria, the beginning of writing. In Ebla, well, perfected writing. You had, on the Iraqi side, you had more letters, more, way more letters. But I just thought they were really, I wanted to do something.
And those pieces are made in Raqqa. Is that?
No, I made them because, you know, I just never knew anything about the Euphrates women.
So you made a homage of these women, or of that?
Yes.
Realization?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Beautiful.
See, and I've used everything in our archives, all the flowers, the petals. This crochet was done like 12 years ago, but it's, you know, I have it in our archives. And so I did that. And then the group that I'm particularly partial to is, which is my personal private collection, is the Lost Generation. Now, the Lost Generation.
I love the title.
Pardon?
I love the title that you've given them.
Well, you know, all women have something to lament. Every woman. And but you still come, you know, but so it's just color symbolism. And of course, this way, you know, give an artist, well, I give myself these challenges. So I thought I'll stay in navy blue and I can use metal colors. So, you know, and like this textile I've been sitting on, this beautiful leopard navy blue, it's a blue.
For you, Aida, who is the forgotten or lost generation?
I mean, it's women who've paid with their lives. It's, you know, it's mothers who are no longer with their children. It's everybody. It could be, I mean, it's a gift to the Syrian women, obviously, but it can translate to Ukrainian women. It can translate to Native Americans, but, you know, you have to address the missing women.
Fascinating and wonderful. I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask, can we obtain these?
Well,
what are you going to do with them?
Okay, so you asked me this question in our group, and I you know, I was speechless. So the group, you're like, what are you doing with it? Well, first of all, they sit in these beautiful boxes covered with tulle, waiting for a nice exhibit at a museum. Now, the Aida and Tulip group is preferable that it goes to a museum that has a Damascus room, or it goes, of course, to an area where Arab women can enjoy them. Reem.
Yes, I'm listening.
because we have to think bigger. Our symbolism has to be, it just can't be Arabic calligraphy, morning, noon, and night. I mean, we have to have a variety. And then my group, the lost generation, if I can let go of it, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, really. I would still work on it. I made two, just not yesterday, since the Ukrainian invasion. I mean, if I'm frustrated, I either cook or I sew. And the more frustrated the artist is, the better the art gets. So it's working out for me.
You need to meet my mother. I am listening to you, and she's listening. I'm sure one of the audiences today. And I keep thinking to myself, my mom, I mean, every word you're saying, it reminds me of her embroidery, her crochet, her knitting,
Oh, really?
and all the emotions that come with it. So this has been really fascinating, Aida. I'm so, so grateful for this beautiful talk that we've just had. And I love it that you wanted to end your slides with these two books. And I'm again, luckily at the Zay Initiative, we have both of them, and they are wonderful, wonderful references.
Yes.
The one on the right is on Syria.
Yes, it's the Kelter Toma collection. So I met Tony Toma in the 90s when I had little children, and he knew I was collecting costumes. Of course, his costumes were fascinating, and he had gold pieces, which are hard to purchase. They're expensive, but he convinced a team of anthropologists in Stuttgart to come down, do the book, and he gave up 90% of his collection to see this book come through. Now, there's only 2 books in the world on Syrian costume. This is the Encyclopedia of Syrian Costume. And the other one is at the Fowler Museum at UCLA. They put out a nice book 2 years ago on a collection of 27 abayas, Syrian abayas.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another museum on my radar. And the Claire Hunter's book, oh my gosh, get Audible, everybody. Listen to it with a light Irish accent. And I mean, it's absolutely the history of women. Like she says, it's the history told through the needle. It's the history of women. The message is
wonderful book. It's nothing to do with democracy. It's about women, and it's about them telling their stories through these embroideries and crafts that they create.
And Queen Mary.
When I read it, it just reminded me of the work that we're doing at Zay. It sort of encompasses everything that we're trying to do. And
exactly. And it's so current. She goes through Queen Mary writing all her secret messages on her clothing and sending it out. And so then they take away her needles, they take away her floss, they take away her silk. And the suffragettes and their banner making, and how in England, women handmade all their banners. And then this guy gets a machine and he starts making the banners by these, it's like sort of like a photocopy machine moves in and it's the investment of women in textiles and in thought and mythology and expression. It's a fascinating book. I've read it. I mean, I've listened to it 3 times.
Yes. I too have it on audio, and I didn't read it. I listened to it. So I totally agree with you on that matter, and I recommend people listen to it and enjoy it. I'm afraid we have to, as much as I'm enjoying this, but Emma is appeared, which tells us we are running out of time. And I'm sure
I could listen to you both. I could listen to you both for so many hours, and I've just literally taken a quick photograph of the Threads of Life books. That's going to be my International Women's Day reading recommendation. I think it'll be absolutely fabulous. I just want to touch the dolls. I just want to feel, the collection. It's just wonderful to be able to sort of feel like we're inside your studio, Aida.
Thank you. Yeah, they're living here
fascinating.
today. Thanks. The dolls are very happy to be seen. They like being seen.
They like being seen. They are, it's just amazing that we're sort of seeing this history in the different areas through the dolls, and the comments coming through on the chat, I don't know whether you can see them, are just incredible, and that people just are absolutely loving it. In terms of questions, wow, well, where to start? They are slowly coming through. If anyone would like to add them into the Q&A or into the chat, please do go ahead. But I think the first question, Ida, I have for you is, which is your favorite collection of the sort of the dolls? And
for me, let's see. I have to say, I think the Ayyubite women, because it just represents, it's feminine, it's staying power. I mean, to walk through Riknuddin Street with the little butcher and the cats waiting for the scraps of fat, and seeing people still living continuously in these beautiful neighborhoods with these domes. You have to see these pink domes, because as they're blush, first of all, if anybody knows makeup, and as the rain came down over the hundreds and hundreds of years, it's bled, so it's streaks of blush. You just can't, it's to me, it's fashion design.
Yes, it is. That's very, very true.
just amazing. The questions just come through. Are all the dresses behind you part of the collection, or are they for sale? Is it your creations or historical?
Oh, well, we're in my showroom. So this whole rack is the collection, which is over 100 pieces, remember, and then this is my collection of clothing. So I still design outerwear, and, I'm really into bringing out the best of you, the best of your skin tone, make you happy. The happier you are with how you got dressed in the morning, happy you are with yourself, the better your day goes.
That's so true. Yes.
I love that. So where can we buy your personal collection that you design?
I have a few pieces with size ranges on our website, but basically we have archive fabrics, and it's a bespoke now collection. So you can order some things. They're really basic, pretty pieces with the emphasis on the textile. It's just fun. Remember, it's all based on Syrian. So you sit down, you're nice and pretty, then your coat falls open and falls on the floor, and then you get another color.
It's beautiful.
Why settle for one textile when you can have two? But it's not two, it's woven.
I'm very conscious of time tonight because we need to be joining behind the scenes, but just one final question, which I think is really important. Are the stories of all the dolls and their dresses documented?
I've been asked by a couple of museums that they wanted documented in what way?
Published, in other words. Have you published them in a book of some sort?
No, because I know, I was talking to Tulip the other day. The less exposure, the happier the museum is. However, if it doesn't go to a juicy museum or collection, you bet there's going to be a book.
Amazing.
But,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're so visual, they're just telling. And if they inspire other people, let them inspire them. I myself, just like you, Dr. Mutwalli, I'm trying to change the narrative. I'm trying to change the narrative of Syrian art, of the Levantine art. I just want to change the approach.
Yeah. Just absolutely fascinating. Oh, sorry, Dr.
I was saying, we said the same words, Emma.
There we go. We're 4,000 miles apart and have been now for many months, Dr. Reem and I, but we're still thinking the same words. Just fascinating. Please, Ida, can we have you back? Lots of people are very keen to hear all about your Syrian collection, so we will chat dates with you and promise the audience that we'll try and get her back later on this year or early into next year. Some diary dates very quickly. For those in Dubai, don't forget to join us for the next webinar on the 22nd of March with Salma Ahmed Kaula artist, writer, and art historian. Look out for your newsletter in your inbox, which will also contain details of a lot of the work we're doing at Expo. There's just 23 days left of Expo 2020 in Dubai, as the radio reminded me this morning. We are on the countdown here. It is wonderful, especially the Syrian Pavilion. There's lots going on. So please do go and take a look. And we ourselves have an event there on the 18th of March. If anyone would like to join, it is invite only, but please email Reem Ashraf, marketing@thezay.org, and we can try and get you a ticket for that. Thank you all for your continued support. You are our community. You are why we're doing all of this. Happy International Women's Day, and we'll see you on the other line for behind the scenes. Good night, everyone, or good morning. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Aida. Bye.